for being here and joining us today. I'm Betta Broad, and I've been working on the New Yorkers for Clean Power campaign for the past 5 years. And I recently took on a new role as the Director of Organizing and Advocacy at the Association for Energy Affordability. And I'm really excited for today's teach-in. I hope that this is the beginning of an ongoing conversation with all of you about how we can work together to build a movement for green affordable housing. You know, decarbonizing our housing infrastructure is not only essential to mitigating the climate crisis, but it will also improve public health, increase energy affordability, and create good paying jobs. Our speakers today are going to talk about how in implementing New York's nation-leading climate law, the CLCPA, we must decarbonize our building sector, and we must do it equitably so that low-income communities and disadvantaged communities are prioritized as we scale up weatherization, energy efficiency, and electrification. We're going to hear about cutting-edge green affordable housing projects on the ground and what the state is doing to help create more. We'll learn about the need to address health and safety as a first step to implementing clean energy solutions. We know we need to electrify our buildings, but there are things that we must do first because it doesn't make sense to install heat pumps in a home that isn't well insulated or has a mold problem or lead or a leaking roof. And finally, we'll hear about how we can take action to push our Congress members to fight for funding at the federal level so that we can scale up green affordable housing projects and invest in programs so more New Yorkers can live in healthy, efficient, and electrified affordable housing. So let's get started. Mick, do you want to say hi and run through the Zoom basics?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Michaela Shabako. I'm the program coordinator with New Yorkers for Clean Power. Thanks for joining us today. And so if you have a question during the presentations, just pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. It's right next to raise your hand. And if you have something else at the bottom of your screen, I have something different because I'm the host. So just put your question in the Q&A, and if our speakers have time, they might have a moment to type in a question, but we'll get to all of the questions at the end of everyone's presentations. We should have about a half an hour or so to answer questions. And if your question wasn't answered, we will do our best to follow up with our speakers to get that question answered for you. And we'll post the Q&A, the recording, and the speaker slides after the event today. You can chat with the fellow attendees in the chat box, but again, if you have your question, please put it in the Q&A so we definitely can have it recorded and not lose it. We will save the chat as well, but just, again, put your question in the Q&A. Okay, and so, yep, this will be recorded. We'll share the slides, and I think that's everything. Let me know if you have questions.
Thanks, Mick. You're the best. Now I want to pass it off to Ibrahim Abdul-Matin, an urban strategist and longtime advocate for sustainability. Ibrahim and I met over a decade ago when I was at Earth Day, New York, and he was at the Mayor's Office of Sustainability in New York City. So it's exciting to get to work together again after all these years. I'll turn it over to you, Ibrahim, to introduce our first speaker.
Excellent. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Betta. This is great to be here. I work on a lot of different issues. Also, I work with an organization called the Living Future Institute, and we focus on the built environment and green buildings. And so being part of this conversation in New York is absolutely critical. And the people that I think about when I think about this are homeowners in Brownsville and parts of East New York that have been, that are like what they would call land rich versus cash poor. Folks that are just, they have it, their families are connecting the dots and staying together and figuring it out. So I just want to put that into your minds as we talk about things today around the human beings that relate to these buildings. So of course, first up, and you know, Jamal, I'm not sure your title. I'm going to just assume that you're running the whole thing, the Healthy Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. So regardless of whether the reality is true or not, the man who makes it happen with the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, Jamal Lewis. I want you to kick us off.
Thank you. And no, I am not running the whole thing. I appreciate that. Hello, everyone. I am Jamal Lewis. I am the Director of Energy, Health, and Climate at the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. And I am going to share my screen. Great. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Betta, Michaela, and all the other panelists who are here. Thanks to all that everyone that's joining us today. I think we have a wonderful lineup, and I can't wait to hear from some of the other folks on this webinar. So just a little bit about the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. Our vision is to advance racial and health equity and opportunity through healthy housing. And so we work to ensure that everyone has access to a healthy, safe, energy efficient, and affordable home, which you know is not the reality for a lot of people. And I think even especially now, right, when there's a heat wave hitting most of the country, that reality is exacerbated, and even people who otherwise would have a healthy, safe, energy efficient, and affordable home, may still be suffering from being negatively impacted by this heat wave. So we have a tremendous opportunity here in New York, and just going to talk a little bit about that to continue to advance the effort to ensure that everyone has access to a healthy, safe, energy efficient, and affordable home. So just a little bit of context. I, as a representative of GHHI, participated in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, Energy Efficiency and Housing Advisory Panel. And so, my role here on the panel today is to talk a little bit about what we proposed and just give a little bit of background for where we are as a state. I would imagine that many of you are aware of these goals that were put in place by the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. I won't go over all of them, but I will point out that in achieving all of these goals, in statute, there's also a requirement for 35 to 40% of the benefits of clean energy investments flowing to disadvantaged communities. And in my mind, these are communities that are underserved, under-resourced, and currently don't have access to a safe, healthy, energy efficient, and affordable home. So for several months, like I said, as a representative of GHHI, I participated with the folks here listed here to propose recommendations for how New York State can achieve these goals. There's a wide array of experience and perspective that participated in the group. But I do want to note that we made sure that we were able to get as much feedback and engagement as possible. So here's just a list of all of the feedback opportunities that we pushed for the panel to host, and many of you participated, and thank you for all of your feedback. I hope that the recommendations reflect your comments. In addition to public outreach, we also coordinated with some of the other panels, recognizing that buildings and housing and energy efficiency touch many other of the panels, such as power generation, which Betta was on, land use and local government. And for New York to really achieve the goal set out in the CLCPA, it really is going to require a cross-sector approach that hits all sectors of the economy. So I have a couple minutes left. I'm supposed to do this quickly. So here are the mitigation strategies that we proposed. So to achieve the state's, the greenhouse gas reduction goal and the clean energy standard, we recommended that the state, should adopt regulations that create emissions and energy efficiency standards, requiring that consumers, requiring more access to information amongst consumers. So doing things like measuring building energy usage, benchmarking energy performance, and making that information accessible so that consumers can have can make the most informed decisions about, where they choose to live, where they choose to set up their businesses, et cetera. I think from my experience, one thing that most people look at, and myself included, when I'm looking, when I was looking for this apartment that I'm in right now, is just looking at the amount that I would have to pay for rent. But there was nothing in there that said, how much I would be paying for energy, or like how, what the efficiency level is of my building. And making that information more accessible can help consumers make, a more informed decision and start to increase the knowledge and amongst consumers for the importance of energy in affordable housing, or how affordable our buildings are. The third point is, in order for us to meet these goals, we have to transition away from fossil fuels and specifically gas. And I know that there's an effort in New York City to do just that. But in order for New York State to reach its goals, its clean energy goals, we can't rely on gas. Gas cannot be a part of that, those strategies. So, but we have to do that carefully in ensuring that we are not exacerbating existing inequities, and that we are not leaving disadvantaged communities to subsidize this, these stranded assets. And the final recommendation, which I am not an expert on, but transitioning away from reliance on HFCs, which are refrigerants with high global warming potential. And so those are not going to help us achieve our state's climate goals as well. So these were the 4 mitigation strategies that we proposed, but we also proposed some enabling initiatives that would help us achieve these goals. And in order for the state to achieve our clean energy goals, we need resources. And if we're going to ensure that disadvantaged communities can benefit from the transition, we have to make sure that there is funding and there are resources to help folks who are under-resourced or underserved to participate. And that results from public dollars. Generally speaking, we just need as many resources as we possibly can to achieve these goals. And so for disadvantaged communities, I think there should be, most of that should come from the public sector. But when thinking about other other buildings that need to transition as well, how can we leverage the mortgage market or other private investors in helping to achieve these goals? Workforce is important. We need people who are trained and qualified to assist with the transition. Again, consumer education. How can we build on the excitement in the room today and expand that excitement to include the average New Yorker? Innovation, do we have all the technologies that we need? Can we make the technologies cheaper over time? All of that is a critical part of the transition. And then thinking about tracking and measuring embodied carbon. So the materials that we use in our buildings, ensuring that the process of harvesting those materials and putting them in our buildings does not entail releasing carbon into the atmosphere. I won't go over all of this, but we need the federal government. We're going to need investments from the feds to help us achieve these goals. And then I'll just note the bottom, energy efficiency is an important part of the transition, making sure that our buildings are as efficient as possible, not only to reduce load on the grid, which is ever more important these days, but also to ensure that disadvantaged communities the affordability of energy can be maximized through efficiency. So I'll leave it there. I think I'm 1 minute over, but it's a hard topic to cover in such a short amount of time. But if anyone has questions, feel free to ask, and I'll try my best to answer them.
Thank you so much, Jamal. That was great. Really appreciate you going over all of that and so succinctly. And I'm sure there will be questions. And I actually see that we already have one in the chat, which Barbara and everybody, if you can please put your questions into the Q&A, not the chat, that would be much easier when we get to the Q&A portion of this. But yes, thank you so much, Jamal, for joining us. Jamal Lewis, the Director of Energy, Health, and Climate at the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. So great to have you on board. And moving on to our next speaker, we have Michael DiRamio, who is the Assistant Director of Energy Affordability and Equity at NYSERDA. Thank you for joining us, Michael.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me here. I think I have some slides that will probably be brought up in just a second here, but happy to get started. I'll just say it's great to be with such a great group here and be talking. I just love the idea of a teach-in, first of all. So it's great to be, all of us are learning here. So I'm happy to give you a little bit more background on what we are doing at NYSERDA. Jamal just provided a great overview of CLCPA and kind of the activity that's happening at that in the Climate Action Council and et cetera. And so I'm not going to spend much time on that, but I do want to just talk about, in particular, we've recently released for the state, a carbon neutral buildings roadmap, and it includes a chapter on LMI housing or low income housing and disadvantaged communities. So I'm going to focus on that. If we could go to the next slide, please. So Jamal already really covered this. This is coming out of the Climate Act. But, you know, as part of the act, the state, it does have a requirement of 35%. We really set the goal as 40% as the floor for benefits from investments, clean energy investments, to go to environmental justice communities and low and moderate income and otherwise vulnerable households. So that's what in the act is referred to as disadvantaged communities. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we really are taking a four-part approach to support disadvantaged communities, which is really about and centered in driving engagement with those communities and developing affordable housing with the needed subsidization, like Jamal was mentioning, that's really critical, while leveraging private investment where possible to scale solutions. So we're really focused on working to do this in a way that engages local communities as part of a long-term plan to ensure that we're achieving a just and equitable transition. So the first strategy we have here is, really the non-negotiable, if you will, is, electrification while preserving affordability. So if we're going to electrify, we need to make sure that in that transition that we're preserving energy affordability and also housing affordability. There is that we want to be careful to reduce the possibility of increasing the burden from building decarbonization efforts on already vulnerable households. So to this end, electrification really must be done in combination, again, like Jamal was mentioning, with efficiency standards and upgrades. We really think that's essential. However, also adding renewable energy, including rooftop solar, and through grid interactivity and demand flexibility, which is just fancy for saying, interacting with the grid at different times when there's a higher level of demand on the overall grid. We want to make sure we're doing that in order to lower the need for some of the existing, for example, peaker plants that we know are a source of pollution in communities. The next strategy or component of our strategy is really recognizing that there are the fact that low-income housing, affordable housing is not one type of housing. It's really a mosaic of different types of housing. So we really need to be mindful of that when we're talking about decarbonization efforts. And, there's different kinds of subsidized housing, as well as naturally occurring affordable housing, and everything from manufactured homes to large multifamily buildings. So, we really want to be very thoughtful and looking at how we can address each of those different types of affordable housing, and really our focus initially is on where there's in the near term where there's opportunities, but over time, expand the variety and types of buildings that are targeted for these kinds of solutions based on available technologies and the regulatory context, again, like Jamal was referring to. So we're going to continue to develop and phase in what we see as the best solutions for each of those types of buildings, and address different heating fuels that we're converting from, and different ownership structures, et cetera. So we really want to meet different building owners and tenants and et cetera where they are, and ensure that this is done the right way. The third strategy here is around community-led initiatives. And so this is recognizing that we really want to, we must aim to provide stakeholders that really have the most vested interest here, right? With all these investments, more control, and ideally even a literal equity stake in these assets, these clean energy and electrification assets, so that there's a pathway to long-term, not just affordability, but also wealth building. Environmental justice is not only a means to achieving certain benefits and outcomes, but also a way of shifting from more exclusive and extractive decision-making processes and expanding the range and knowledge and the voices that are valued at the table, the decision-making table. So the general theory here is that communities that are more engaged in deciding how resources are allocated, and how programs are designed, these programs will better meet their needs. And then finally, holistic approaches to low-income and disadvantaged communities. So this is really about integrating multiple solutions. As I noted, there's a tremendous, well, actually, I'm not sure I did note, but Jamal certainly noted there's a tremendous opportunity to benefit LMI households living in substandard housing through upgrades that simultaneously address deferred maintenance, which is more common, we know, in LMI housing, along with the electrification and efficiency and renewable energy. So there's a tremendous value to communities from integrating these solutions, and also resilience solutions such as energy storage and things like community cooling centers. These buildings can become, if we design it that way, to be able to weather the inevitable disruptions like the heat waves that Jamal was mentioning, et cetera, and maintain comfortable living conditions. So the next slide. So just briefly, I'm going to not do justice to any of these, but just to give you a sense of the types of initiatives that we have in play right now as this table setting that Jamal was speaking to is happening. There is commitments for over $1 billion in clean energy investments in LMI housing in the state through 2025. In coordination with the joint utilities, the state of New York, is committed to investing in these upgrades, and funding for multifamily affordable housing is a key component of that, as you can see across the different programs. We're really looking at housing electrification, combining existing market rate incentives with additional incentives that specifically are targeted for LMI home ownership, as well as affordable rental properties, to demonstrate heat pumps as a clean heating and cooling technology that improves the comfort while preserving energy affordability. We also have programs that are focused on solar for LMI households, and just looking at other opportunities here for engaging with housing agencies. Right now, we're piloting efforts with the state, at the state level, and with the city, and just focus on how can we integrate some of the funding to make it simpler for building owners that are refinancing, for example, and just offset that incremental cost that we know comes with some of these technologies. So, you know, lots to be done here, not enough time to speak to it, but just I'll say that there are some additional slides in the deck here that will be shared that give some more background. I would mention just the workforce development. You know, that's going to be key if we're going to ensure that jobs are created and that, you know, especially folks in, you know, living in disadvantaged communities that have really faced structural barriers and inequities and injustice to accessing economic opportunities. So we really need to do more to partner with communities to ensure that there is a pathway here into the growing job opportunities that will be created from all these investments. So we're committed to that, certainly here at NYSERDA and at the state as a whole. But with that, I'll turn it back over to, actually, I'm not sure who's taking it from here.
That would be me. That was great. I was taking tons of notes. I'm sure everybody here was very appreciative of that. And I appreciate how you started with this being a kind of a, what do you call it? Like, we're learning together. We're working together. We're learning together. That's great. That was awesome. And it's very heartening to hear this from the state of New York, the state that I grew up in, just so, you know, the words are in the right place, and it's very beautiful. Now we got to get the whole thing moving in that direction, but that's a great thing. Thank you so much. Next up, we want to have Zach Fink, who's the CEO of ZBF Geothermal, talking about the Beach Green Dunes project. And just Zach, before we begin, anybody talking about geothermal is like my best friend ever. So we're instantly best friends. So we run into each other on the subway, and now we have to give each other a hug either way.
I'm glad to have a new best friend. All right, so I'm talking about Beach Green Dunes, which is an affordable housing project in Far Rockaway. You had mentioned Brownsville before. We actually have 6 projects in Brownsville right now going on with geothermal, 3 under construction, 3 about to start construction. So what we're presenting can be done anywhere in New York City, Westchester, upstate New York, Long Island. So that's kind of cool. So Beach Green Dunes is New York City's like first affordable passive housing project that went geothermal. It's 127 units. It's 100% affordable, about 113,000 square feet, including some retail space. The coolest part of this for me is that cooling in the building is only $10 a month. If you think about, you know, environmental justice and the access to air conditioning and kids being able to better learn in this remote learning environment, if your bill was $100, $200, $300 a month on an apartment that you might be paying, you know, $300 to $800 a month for, that's a big increase. But $10 a month greatly increases the affordability. It's also one of the only places that you can get a beachfront apartment. Just the location. So there's 2 phases that have been built of this development at this point. Beach Green Dunes 1, which is where the red cursor is, and then Beach Green Dunes 2, which is to the left. Our loop field's installed in the parking lot space around it. But if you look and see, you'll see the subway directly in front of it, which brought first New York City permitting challenges to this project. And it was the first project that got approval to drill an uncased borehole within 200 feet of the MTA structure for geothermal. So we set the precedent to be able to do it in the future, and we've done it successfully on several projects since. So we have 36 boreholes, each to a depth of 450 feet. The big thing is the vertical stack heat pumps in this building are the same heat pumps that you would typically see in any high-rise building in New York City. Engineers, builders, developers, superintendents of the buildings are all familiar with them. They provide central air conditioning like comfort, so it's more even comfort and they're less noisy than say a window unit or a PTAC unit that would typically exist. So as I mentioned, it was the first closed loop affordable housing building in New York City to install a geothermal system. It's the first building to have received MTA approval to drill within 200 feet of the transit structure. We since have 3 additional projects that have that. And at the time of construction, it was the largest affordable housing building to install a geothermal system in the United States. Everyone always asks me what it looks like during installation. So these are just some photos from drilling of the ground loop, the drill rig, the vibration monitoring that we put on the transit structure to make sure we didn't collapse it or, impact it, and then just the loop being installed in the ground. After we drill, all the boreholes are grouted, so there's no impact to environmental aquifers. Last thing we'd want to do is install an environmentally friendly technology and pollute drinking water supply. My main business is on Long Island from an installation standpoint, where we're sole source aquifers. So you just want to be careful whatever you do doesn't have a negative impact elsewhere. Inside the building, so Far Rockaway is located in a flood zone. So all of the equipment, the pumps, anything that could get wet and submerge is located on the roof. The mechanical equipment is what's shown here. And it's and everything is designed to be able to get submerged in the event of another flood event. The photo to the right is a vertical stack heat pump that would appear in an apartment. The filter access is right in the front. These have high efficiency filters. The MERV 13 filters that you heard talked about during COVID for the movie theaters and the malls to reopen is what this building has in it. So in addition to having, affordable cooling, you also have better air quality. There are some, incentives. This project was supported by a $111,000 rebate check from PSEG. If this project was in Con Edison's territory, so the rest of New York City, under the current clean heat program, it would get somewhere around $250,000. So incentives have been trending upward, which is a good sign. And with that, we'll save questions for later.
Thanks so much, Zach. That was incredible. I fantasized for years about moving to the Rockaways, and that just looks like a dream building to live in, and really amazing that it's only $10 a month for cooling. Very cool, pun intended. So thank you so much for sharing all that great information. Next up, we have another speaker on a cutting edge project, and this one is actually where I do live here in Kingston, in the Hudson Valley. And we're going to hear from Guy Kempe, who is the Vice President of Community Development at RUPCO. Guy, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Betta. It's great to see you today, and it's fun to be here. And I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a second. And hopefully that's working. Can you see my screen? Can somebody say?
Yes. Yep. Perfect.
Great. So happy to introduce you to Energy Square, which is a project that we actually leased up in the middle of the pandemic. It's a 57-unit affordable project. You'll notice one of the characteristics of it is that it has a facade that is punctuated as if it's a series of buildings that might naturally occur in a community, and it speaks to the architectural appearance of Kingston. I created this deck to pretty much explain some of the thinking that we had going into it. It is served both by geothermal and by solar PV. It is the first zero net energy for living project that's affordable in upstate New York. We did a couple of innovative things here, but I guess one of the things that I wanted to mention was that all of the individual heat pumps for the apartments are not accessed from the interior of the apartment, but rather from the hallway, so that they can be maintained without intruding into the private space of residents. The thing about Kingston is and Midtown in particular, is that it's an arts community. And so we identified before we ever broke ground that the principal tenant on the main floor would be the Center for Creative Education. So a lot of the images here speak to that. Our priorities for creating this building are pretty straightforward. But frankly, the site itself had been a failed bowling alley that really was an evidence of urban blight, and we wanted to remove that and create not only a home for this Center for Creative Education, but an affordable housing opportunity. This was funded in part by low-income housing tax credits from New York State Homes and Community Renewal. And it's a middle income program, meaning that we achieve 60% of area median income overall for all of these rental units by serving some folks who are up to 90% of AMI. So we can go down to serving folks as low as 30% of AMI. This is just an image of the equipment in the basement. It shows the geothermal system that comes in, and the PV system, as well as the Leviton system, which we chose to do net metering for the entire building. So the tenants actually don't pay an electric bill at all. This system, the Leviton system, allows us to monitor electric use through the entire building. This speaks to the way we optimize the overall building envelope to ensure that it would be a comfortable environment for the residents. One thing I like to mention is that all of the individual units in the building are served with their own individual air exchange, so that if your neighbor is cooking that annoying pad thai that they do every night, you don't have to smell it, and vice versa. This is, again, just an explanation of how we sealed the roof to ensure the highest possible energy efficiency. I like to tell people that we were aiming at LEED Gold, and we overachieved. This is a LEED Platinum building. We are, like is the case at Beach Green Dunes too. We're in an urban environment, but we were in a central location, really in the center of the city, located right across the street from a large proscenium theater called Ulster Performing Arts Center, and next to Broadway. Again, this just speaks to the way we ventilated the building, and we're able to achieve extraordinary energy efficiency by doing so. I'd like to compare it to passive house design, because a lot of folks are very enthusiastic about that, and so are we. We chose not to actually use that standard. Again, this is my version of SAC's obligatory photograph showing the drilling of the geothermal wells. And I got to tell you, we actually did discover an underground lake, basically underneath the site. Once you got down to about 150, 175 feet below the crust. And we had to re-engineer a little bit during that install to ensure that we would have the thermal exchange we needed to both heat and cool the building. This is what it looks like today. On this far end that's all lit up here, that's actually the Midtown Arts District office, which is, as I said, central to the city and to Midtown, and part of our strategy to revitalize the community. This is something that's kind of unusual. We built a sort of a mini High Line on the back of this building. That's an elevated deck for recreation and outdoor space, and there's parking underneath it. And this also shows that we actually wrapped the building in the masonry so that it would look like it was actually individual buildings rather than one single structure. And this is just another example of how the roof deck is getting used. You can also see that we did these canopies over the parking areas for additional solar. And this is the slide that people often ask how we funded it. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we received a Cleaner, Greener Communities grant of $1 million from NYSERDA to do this project, along with other incentives as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was really great. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much. That was really great and really informative. So next up, that was great. There's a million things and a million questions I have personally, so I can't wait. I love how you knitted it all together. It's very beautiful, very impressive. Next up is Elizabeth McDade, Director of Rochester Energy Efficiency and Weatherization, Renew, who will speak about their innovative funding program for investing in healthy and energy efficient homes for low-income residents of Rochester. And just before you start, Rochester to me is like the heart in some ways of our state, in many ways, like politically and in terms of what the choices that we make. So not to throw a heavy thing into that for you, Elizabeth, but you're holding the soul. you're holding the soul, and you know, with the echoes of Harriet Tubman and you know, just Frederick Douglass and the NAACP and just the whole energy that emanates from there historically.
Well, I'm doing my best, and I'm going to share this screen now to show you what we've been doing. So can everybody see that? All right. So I had too many slides, so I'm going to try and go quickly. Always. There we go. Okay, so upstate New York, the real upstate New York guy, you got to keep going if you're going to go to upstate New York. We were a wealthy city at one point, Kodak, Xerox, all kinds of terrific stuff. Not so much the case now. We have some very serious titles, including ranks fourth in overall poverty, and we have some very significant lead poisoning rates as well. But our community actually has a history of working. The Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning has been here, the Rochester Healthy Home Partnership. So our community has a history of about 2 decades at this point of community partners coming together, working together collectively to look at health and housing and how do they co-inform. So Renew started because the New York State Attorney General gave the city of Rochester $1 million as part of settlement funds, which happened several years ago. He also gave money to Buffalo and to Syracuse and to other communities across New York State. We took that money and really loved the work that came out of it. We built the work that we're doing upon the partners that are already working in the areas of the Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning, the Healthy Home Partnership, et cetera, and all of those relationships that we'd already established and began to build upon. So at this point, here are some of our community partners. The $1 million we've spent already, and our work continues through grants that I solicit through the ESL Charitable Foundation. The Rochester Area Community Foundation has been very generous and supportive, and all of this work is housed at the Rochester Area Community Foundation. So we, at this point, have collectively invested $4.9 million into the homes of 336 low to moderate income homeowners. The majority of our clients, because we also do collect demographic data afterwards, are women of color, head of household with children. We actually have information on their annual incomes, et cetera. We are also doing, and I'll go more into this in a little bit, we're also doing post-energy audits. So I'm able to actually tell you that of our clients, I know that they are seeing an average of at least 20% savings on energy costs. And we also go and do interviews on those who have a self-reported pre-existing respiratory condition. 100% of them have reported a reduction in their symptoms. We're also calculating our greenhouse gas emission reductions. And at this point, we are keeping, and we only started halfway, so this isn't a full accounting of all the work that we've done, over 4.5 tons of greenhouse gas from the atmosphere. So our criteria is that the homeowners must be working with one of our community partners and meet that partner's eligibility criteria. We do not impose another set of income guidelines. The work has to fund energy efficiency, weatherization, and health and safety, or, and this is an important caveat and one of the reasons why our partners love us, or remove the barriers that render that homeowner ineligible. So for example, sewer line or electrical panel or mold remediation. So by removing that barrier, then that homeowner can actually access the energy efficiency and weatherization funds. We are not the primary funder. At least a 50% match. Our priorities are no heat, hot water. They're not eligible for emergency programs, and sewage in the basement, which is an ongoing problem, is a huge priority. So here's some demographic data. One of the things I've actually started doing recently is actually tracking, because we also get copies of the utility bills as part of the proposals. I've been tracking the actual amount that clients owe, are in arrears on their utility bills, and just 6 of them recently had utility bills overdue in the amounts ranging from $995 to $3,500, almost $3,600. We've also expanded this work. It started originally just within the city of Rochester. That's where the Attorney General's initial funding was required to be spent. And we are expanding to ring zip codes as well, because Rochester doesn't have, a river around it like in Manhattan or some of the suburbs. It's just a couple of feet away. The suburbs are all very interconnected, and in some ways, the families that are living in our suburbs have just as many of the issues and concerns that families do in the city. So here's an unupdated map. There's a lot more dots on that, but at this point, we're at 336 projects. And the money that we've put in is 1.2 million, and that's collectively including all of the grants and the Attorney General's funding, individual donations, et cetera, as well as the partner dollars that come from a variety of funding sources. Oh, and the average grant is only about $3,700. So here's some of our partners. Here's the work that they've put in to see this, and it's a variety of sort of the funding that's available. Let me go back to that one. And a majority of it, of course, is coming from New York State and NYSERDA. Thank you very much. And a variety of programs that have come along. Homeowners, I think, is an important thing to consider here. This isn't just free money in some ways, right? Homeowners are also making an investment, and in many cases, some of them have taken out low interest loans through NeighborWorks Community Partners here in Rochester, which is another way that homeowners can actually leverage the dollars that they're taking out to make their homes more energy efficient. Here's a broad list of the things that we're looking at, because of course we're also looking at health and safety items. We're looking at making sure that people are getting furnaces, hot water heaters, et cetera. We've been, and I'm going fast, my apologies for this. I wanted to show some of the stories that we've got going on with this. So here are actual stories, and here's actual pie charts of how the funding got braided. And then in some cases, it also includes the energy cost reductions. So some of these projects, we collected the energy data, so we're able to do the post. Some of them were older. There's a variety of reasons why, but you can see that there's a significant decrease. This homeowner wasn't going to get any work done if the sewer line didn't get repaired. And as a result of that, she was able to get a bunch of work that actually made all of these decreases and the carbon emission reduction possible. This is a pretty significant before and after. This guy got a lot of funding from the city of Rochester, which was terrific. Some of the things that are also included when we talk about this work are also the better mental health outcomes. This gentleman was feeling very overwhelmed with trying to take care of his home, and really discouraged by that. And when he saw the work that was happening, he ended up doing other stuff that also improved the quality of his home that was not included in the work scope, that really just added to the whole package. And really, he talked about a better mental health outcome as a result of living in a healthier and safer home. The energy cost decrease and all of that stuff were just icing on that cake. Again, a wide variety of funding that comes in, how we're braiding it, and talking about some of the health outcomes that we see as a result of this work. This homeowner's adult onset asthma was reduced as a result of getting a new furnace in. This homeowner actually had BOOP, and one of the cool things about this project is because our community partners are all well versed in each other's programs, this homeowner was actually looking for help with just getting mold remediated. Our community partner went in and said, well, you know what, you're also in an area where we should be doing lead remediation, and you're taking care of grandchildren that are spending time here, so you qualify for a City of Rochester lead grant. And we can also get you this, and we can also get you this. And so she ended up getting, taking that holistic approach to this idea of thinking about who lives in this home. What are the needs of the individual in this home, and how do we actually make the healthier, safer home for everybody that's there? And then looking at the energy cost decrease, and of course, the carbon emission reductions. Another great story about a homeowner who did a significant, this is, doing a lot to her, taking out a loan to get all this work done, but talking about this home was a whole home rehab, is pretty amazing. This home had raw sewage in the basement, and again, had no other recourse, had put in all of the money that she could possibly put into taking care of her home that she bought through foreclosure, and was able to actually get the sewer fixed because of the work that we were doing. Then some of the things, and sort of talking about this stuff, we've actually been really focusing on clean heating and cooling technologies and installing those furnaces and heat pump hot water heaters in the past couple of years. At this point, we've installed over 30 heat pump hot water heaters and furnaces. We actually worked with the first near net zero rehab of an older home in the city of Rochester. That was a huge collective project that involved many community partners. Here's some cool data. We've got some splits going there with our heat pump furnaces and so forth, and you can see that the decrease in energy costs is significant. So we are really thrilled to see when we're talking about a 20% reduction, we're actually seeing now 50 and 60 in some cases, pretty amazing. This gentleman's utility bill went from $300 to $15. And here's some other great stats: 43.81 decrease, 36.46. Again, 41. These are all heat pump hot water heaters getting installed into these homes. And so we're also calculating, we actually go in and we use, we get our utility bills from our local utility, which is our RG&E. We actually do figure out the decrease using cooling degree days and heating degree days and all kinds of stuff that I thought I wouldn't be doing anymore. Then we actually go and do the using algebra and figured out the carbon emission reductions based upon all of the stuff that we need to do all of that. And so we're calculating all of that going into and keeping track of all of that for our projects. We all know why this is super important to look at this. All of the great healthcare benefits that are coming out of this work, definitely cannot underscore all of that. And then one of the things that we're doing, in addition to continuing to write grants and to look for funding, my mantra is the American Rescue Plan funding should just give me all their money and I'll figure out how to spend it, and we'll make sure everybody gets a heat pump hot water heater in their home. We're also doing a climate fund. So trying to get people here in Rochester and in the area to offset their carbon emissions and then donate them to Renew. And then we use those funds to actually install heat pump hot water heaters into the homes of our clients. So this is an example of how collective impact can be an example to understand the economic and health impact that client smart initiatives have the potential to achieve. So we're talking about improved community health status, transform neighborhoods, et cetera. And one of the things that I think is really fun about or interesting about this work is that offsetting carbon emissions is not new, but investing those donations to help our neighbors, as well as modeling an easily replicable approach for other communities is a new way to think about it. So I will stop there and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope I did not go over.
Elizabeth, so incredibly inspiring, and I loved hearing about the individuals whose lives have been helped and even transformed by this work. And it was also your plea about the American Rescue Plan money going to Renew as a perfect segue to our next speaker, Jen Metzger, who many of you know as the New York State Senator, just south of here in the Hudson Valley until very recently. And New Yorkers for Clean Power has been incredibly fortunate to have Jen helping out as a policy advisor recently. And Jen's going to talk about what we can all do to really push our Congress members so that we can expand programs like Renew and see these types of projects and programs happening all over the state. It's tremendously exciting the moment that we're in. It's a huge opportunity, but it's going to take all of us to take action. So I'll pass it off to Jen. Last but not least, take it away.
Thank you, Betta. Just making sure my volume is on. So first, I just want to give a shout out to our incredible panel, and just it's so inspiring to hear about the projects that are happening on the ground here in New York to create healthy, energy efficient, affordable housing. It's not only helping us reduce climate damaging emissions, but as Betta said, it's improving people's lives in huge and measurable ways. It's improving their health and well-being and reducing the energy burden. And now, and I actually just drove recently, Guy, past Energy Square and remembered when that was a bowling alley and thought, this is incredible. And just a kind of transformation that we need to see across the state. And we really need to scale up these kinds of efforts across New York in a big way. We can't have a just transition to a clean energy system without tackling affordable housing. low-income communities and communities of color in particular have borne the heaviest cost of society's impact on the environment. It's their neighborhoods where fossil fuel infrastructure and other polluting facilities have been sited, and the health of these communities has suffered disproportionately as a result. And as we've also, been talking about today, it's not just the neighborhoods that are a threat, but the very homes that people live in, and the harms done by lead, molds. I don't think we've mentioned it yet, but just the harmful emissions from on-site combustion of appliances like stoves is tremendous. I had the great privilege when I was in the state Senate of helping pass the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It's not only one of the most ambitious climate laws in the country in terms of its emissions and energy targets, it's also one of the most forward-thinking in terms of its commitment to equity. But now this is like where the rubber really hits the road, and we have to work hard, do the hard work right now to implement it. The building sector is beyond doubt the greatest challenge. It's a big chunk of our state's emissions. This accounts for about 30% of direct emissions. And while there are these huge benefits to these investments, we've talked about today in terms of energy cost savings, benefits to public health, to job creation, they require a big upfront investment. And the fact is that nearly half of New Yorkers are low and moderate income and are struggling as it is and do not have the money in the bank to make these kinds of investments. So, to make these investments happen at a scale and in the time frame that we need to make them happen, which is a fairly short time frame, we need to marshal a lot of public and private capital to get this done. NYSERDA has estimated that we need about $1 billion a year to make the necessary improvements to low and moderate income homes in order to meet our climate goals. Just to put it in perspective, the state has incredible, programs. The Empower program, the Energy Star Home Assisted Energy Star program, but they're retrofitting, and the multifamily housing program, I think it's around $15,000 a year, or at least $15,000 this past year, and has given important support to programs like Elizabeth's organization and Guy's organization to do these amazing projects. But NYSERDA has estimated that we have to be upgrading 200,000 homes a year by 2030, again, to reach our climate goals. So, we just have to scale this up in an extraordinary way. And this is, not just a New York challenge. This is a national challenge. President Biden recognized the need and the urgency of a federal commitment to energy efficient, affordable housing, and included about $2 billion in the original American Jobs Plan proposal, which is a good start, but we need a much more robust commitment. And of course, we're all following the politics with the infrastructure bill right now, but we have to press for the climate provisions, and we have to make sure that affordable housing is incorporated into that final bill. And it's not just about retrofitting the existing affordable housing stock, which is a huge, but it's also about building new green, energy efficient and all electric affordable housing, because as we all know, we face not just a climate crisis, but really an affordable housing crisis in New York and in the country. And we need to make sure that when we're building new units, we're future-proofing them. So we hope you will all join us in the effort to push for an infrastructure package that will put people to work building, weatherizing, and retrofitting at least 4 million affordable energy efficient homes in the next 4 years. Of course, we want this, ongoing into the future. But I know it probably doesn't sound like it hardly scratches the surface, even just for New York. But to put it in perspective, the Federal Weatherization Assistance Program currently weatherizes about 35,000 homes annually. So we have to, there's a lot of room for growth in these programs. We've put together a letter signed by more than 60 environmental, housing, labor, health, and community-based organizations, urging the New York congressional delegation to support a package of measures that will really get us on track to meet our affordable housing and energy goals. And Mick, maybe you could just, let's see. Oh, she's already got it up. You just scroll through it. You can see it's like an incredibly detailed letter, and I'm not going to go through all of the recommendations, but just want to note that it's not just about new investment in tax credits, although that's like very critical, but it's also about aligning existing affordable housing and weatherization programs with our climate goals. For instance, by making sure that like HEAP grants enable program participants not just to like replace their boilers with another boiler, but instead with energy efficient heat pumps and get off of fossil fuels altogether. It's also about investing in the workforce development to build the trained workforce we need to future-proof our buildings, including financial assistance to small businesses to expand and train their workforce and retrofitting homes, supporting a new civilian climate corps modeled on the New Deal Conservation Corps, because this is like what it's going to take, so we can get, we can put millions of people to work to do the retrofitting of public housing and the other resilience and energy projects that we need to get built in, again, a fairly short period of time. And studies have shown that like delaying is just going to increase the cost considerably, and some of the impacts of climate change, many of those impacts are lasting. So this is a pivotal moment right now, and we need all hands on deck, really pushing for this at the federal level. So I'm going to, we've got a list of actions that you can take. If you're part of an organization that would be interested in signing on to the letter, we're still taking sign-ons. It has already been sent to the New York congressional delegation, and we're doing follow-up. And if you'd like to be part of that follow-up, that would be great. I want to turn it over now to Mick, and she can go through some of the actions that you can take to help support this effort.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jen. And let me, okay. So we have a form that I'll link in the chat, and I'll also follow up with everyone after this event with this link. But you can add your information and just choose what action you would like to help us with in making sure the Democratic delegation, but Congress in general, just has this in their hands and is taking this seriously. So you can send an email to your Congress member. You can join us in a virtual meeting with your Congress member, and you could call your Congress member. We'll provide a brief script. I know that can be intimidating sometimes, but I always just do a practice call right before, and then it's pretty easy just to leave a message with them. And usually you can ask for their staff person. So it's pretty easy to do. And you could also write a letter to the editor. Letters to the editor are really impactful. We'll help with this. And you can also draw from the letter that we have on our site. And so if you just go to our site, year. Well, okay, yeah, and this will be the full letter, and you can download it to get more details, but we can also give you some pointers as well. So these are all take actions that you can do, but we would help with, and so you just fill this out, and we'll follow up with you. And I'll put that in the chat right now for everyone. So
Great.
I think that we can answer some of the questions that everyone has been putting in.
Okay, perfect. I see that a lot of the questions were already answered, but one of the ways that we learn is hearing people's questions and the answers. So, and we can also share these in the follow-up too, if that's helpful, because sometimes, you know, we do that in our follow-up. So let's see, where should we start?
Maybe I'll
Ibrahim,
start.
you wanna kick it off?
Yeah, I'll start with Dave Pablo, and I see that Michael is actually answering. I love this technology. So he says, I live in Troy, New York. Troy has been trending upward for about a decade, but like many New York communities, has a big lead problem and a host of old neglected buildings that are energy inefficient. How applicable are heat pumps and other technologies for retrofit projects in urban residential neighborhoods? This is the central question. What kind of funding is out there? Same question for small business buildings. I have a one-story flat roof, 6,500 square foot building. I want to rehab using green technologies. What are the best sites to go to for more information and connecting to skilled contractors? I love this question for 3 reasons. One, I went to high school in Troy, so just Troy graduate and representing, and I understood it very much so when it was not the way it was trending up now. But I remember that very clearly. I had a very beautiful built environment, and there was a lot of promise there. So I think folks could touch on some of those pieces, but really the specific question around the technologies and also like resources. So this would be a great opportunity for the panelists, not to go into like a long soliloquy, but be like, this is where I go to get information. This is a great place to go to get some sources. Maybe throw those answers into the chat here, or into the as one of the answers on the Q&A, so we can get a running list of whatever comes up that you guys want to put in there now. But if anyone wants to answer that directly, that's great. Jen, you're itching. I feel like I want to answer vibe. No, okay. All right, great. So I just want to reiterate, like, put some of those things that you're for sources or ideas or questions or other information in there. One of the things that comes up to me with this is that we need to do great matching between firms that already exist and firms that are and projects that are going to be happening soon. And that's part of this sort of, how do we connect to the folks that are able to do some of this work? Because it's not just jobs, it's going to be like building whole people's companies and developing their entire, they're able to bring on and train other workers within a sort of small business context. So there's a lot of stuff here that's good stuff. Thank you, Dave. Betta, you want to take the next one?
Sure. So maybe we'll go back to some of the questions that Jamal got in the beginning.
Great.
So let's see, how about one from John Shavako? Do you think the process to implement the Climate Action Council's Energy Efficiency and Housing Panel recommendations will be an effective one? So that's very subjective, but an interesting question. And Jamal, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really subjective, and I think it's a really good question. I think it can be really effective. I think there's a lot of potential there with the process and ensuring that that in the process is built in the process is opportunities for community engagement and resident and New Yorker input. And I think my answer to that answer to the question was that the extent to which the process and the implementation of the recommendations is effective and successful, I think will depend largely on the amount of engagement that New Yorkers have within the process. Because the saying goes, devil's in the details, and so in order to ensure that we can meet these goals while promoting and advancing equity and ensuring that the benefits can reach all New Yorkers, We need feedback. We need people engaged in letting the Climate Action Council know how these recommendations will ultimately impact their communities. So I think it's a really good question, and I would love to hear, John, what you think as well.
And we'll definitely be keeping our network in the loop for future opportunities to comment on the Climate Action Council activities and scoping plans. So stay tuned for that.
Can I ask a follow up to that? What's this? Just overall for people to know the status of that process, and where are we at with it, like in terms of it, just to refresh on that, if you don't mind, Jamal.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I wanted to say this earlier during my presentation, but there was a lot to cover. One of the other panels is the Climate Justice Working Group that was put together to ensure that the climate goals are reached and that the requirement for 35 to 40% of benefits accrue to disadvantaged communities. So that's essentially their role. And they just provided some feedback on the recommendations, which you can find on the website, on New York State's website. I think it's climate.newyork.gov or something like that. And so the Climate Justice Working Group just provided their feedback to the Climate Action Council, who will ultimately be the entity that proposes the scoping plan that encompasses not only the recommendations from the Energy Efficiency and Housing panel, but also the other panels as well. So I think towards the end of next year is when there's going to be a final scoping plan that will be put forth to help guide New York's clean energy transition.
Sounds like there's going to need to be a parade when that happens, based on all the steps that you just outlined there. we have to do something joyous when that goes down.
Betta, does that reign true to you too?
The parade, yes, let's definitely. Yes.
I just want to Betta, just add one thing that I think it's going to be, critical that as the state, as we're trying to reach these goals of the state, that there is a serious partnership with and support for the community-based organizations like Renew, organizations like RUPCO, and organizations based in the communities where this work has to be done. Those partnerships are going to be critical. So it can't be top-down solutions. And I just want to make that point. I also wanted to just respond to a comment that Mike DeWine made about energy efficiency and going all electric and installing heat pumps, and the importance of making sure that we're also doing the work to tighten the building envelope and make the weatherization and other improvements as well. And that is a critical piece of it. So it really has to be done. Every building, every household is going to be different, is going to be its own unique challenge. But it's also going to have to be looked at holistically as we make these investments.
I heard of one site in Manhattan regarding the tightening the envelope, where they built a demonstration site adjacent to the main site of the building. And they just did it for training and teaching purposes for the workers to understand, what does it mean to tighten the envelope? What does it look like? So I think there's going to have to be a lot more examples where people are learning on site in real time. Because I'm just responding in some ways to there's a lot of questions here, a lot of things related to workforce development, and also someone's role in it, someone shifting careers. And so I wonder if folks could just speak a little bit about that. And specifically, I'm an owner of a small installer and engineering company, and we're trying to build our community, and we're looking to work with BOCES to help with their construction tech program. Are there other things like that I would throw into the conversation, not just BOCES? Also, the question that comes in about I'm trying to start a co-op to help train and employ people who are interested in learning green, ethical, and sustainable building techniques. That is the future. That's where we need to be going, critiquing the entire thing. So please dive in. Anyone on the panel, dive in those areas around not only around workforce development, but ownership opportunities, as well as cooperatives to help solve the problems and be the sources.
So education and workforce development cannot be understated how important this is. We had all of this funding in these initiatives to do some clean heating and cooling technologies, and I mean, there was funding available, and kind of nobody was taking the bait. And then I realized that all of the people that we've been working with didn't know how it worked. And nobody wants to look stupid, right? So nobody wants to ask a dumb question in front of other people. And so one of our partners actually had installed a heat pump hot water heater at his house. So I said, can we do, like, instead of meeting to talk, can we actually meet at your house and you do like an in-service just for us to figure out? And then, and it worked. Everybody came. We all learned how to do it. And then, like 2 months later, I got a phone call from the city going, when are you scheduling that other class for everybody to learn how heat pumps work? I'm like, we're not doing that, but that's an awesome idea. We should totally keep doing that. But I think we also have to not make assumptions about who knows what, and also understand that if there's reluctance, it could be because people don't know what it is. And so always, and I also was working with a homeowner who got a heat pump hot water heater, had a ton of savings. I'm like, and we were actually in this group conversation about how awesome it was with one of the funders. And she's like, no, it's just a regular old hot water heater. I'm like, no, you definitely have a heat pump hot water heater. Like you totally have one. And she's like, no, she really pushed back. And I didn't throw her under the bus in that call. But afterwards I got off the phone and I called our partner and our contractor and I said, either that homeowner did not get educated or the contractor has lied to us. And either case, I'm gonna go to that lady's basement and see what's in there. And it turns out she thought anything, it had to look tankless. Right? That was her assumption about what clean heating and cooling looked like. Because a heat pump hot water heater looks like a regular old hot water heater, she didn't understand it. So I think part of it, there's a lot of education on a lot of levels where we can't make assumptions about who knows what.
Absolutely. More education and job training is so key. Does anybody else want to chime in on that important question?
Yeah, I can jump in. This is Michael. So yeah, this is great. I mean, just want to echo what everybody else has said about the importance of, if we're going to help people understand, there's that consumer education side, just to understand what are these technologies, how do they work, and then the workforce side, so that we ensure that the communities we're talking about here really are not just on the receiving end, but also really on the creating end, right? They're creating this just transition we're talking about. And along that lines, we were in the process of, we've sort of soft announced regional clean energy hubs, funding for regional clean energy hubs for this, in part for what we're talking about, that will have a very strong workforce connections component as part of that, really to build that regional network that we know is needed, so that there are community-based solutions and pathways, career pathways into these job opportunities, et cetera. So there's currently a clearinghouse right now. So for anybody that wants to be part of one of those regional hubs, you can kind of throw your name in the hat for anybody that might be wanting to pursue one of those as a contractor. So yeah, just want to echo the importance of training, partnering with employers, but also partnering with communities to ensure that pathways are there.
Thanks, Michael. And we can include a link to the hub clearinghouse sign up webpage in our follow-up, because we definitely do want to promote that exciting new program. Anybody else have thoughts on workforce? Also, I should say that, the green jobs component of this is an important part of our letter, which if you haven't read, please do. And, we decided for this particular teach-in to really focus on the housing side of it. We've done actually green jobs, an online teach-in on green jobs in the past, which I rewatched recently with our dear friend and colleague who passed, Cecil Corbin Mark. He was one of the speakers on that. And anyway, I I hope that we can do another green jobs focused online teach-in sometime soon, because it is such a key part of this. But while we're on the subject, did anybody else want to chime in about that topic? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question. Zach, were you going to say something?
Yeah, on the workforce development side, from a heat pump perspective, they're not that different from air conditioning units. So there's already workforce that already do conventional air conditioning systems that need some training, but not a whole lot of training to become a massive marketplace. From a ground source heat pump perspective, the drilling is probably going to be the biggest piece of the puzzle, because you can't magically wave a wand and have 100 drill rigs out there tomorrow morning. It takes some time and capital, and it's a different skill set. But from heat pumps, we've personally had a lot of success with hiring someone that never saw a geothermal heat pump, and in 3 or 4 months, they have the ability to install one.
That is awesome intel. Does anyone else want to add any content like that? Any thoughts along those lines about applicable technologies and existing skill sets or existing disciplines or industries, just real quick before we shift to the next thing? Anything else from you, Zach? I think that was like spot on. Anything else like that?
I mean, the other thing is, I know a lot. While I personally have not had success with this, NYSERDA has the workforce development training that, to an employer, if I hire someone from, a historically disadvantaged population or area, environmental justice area, they'll pay 75% of that salary for the first 24 weeks to get them trained. So there's a lot of money and funding available. Unfortunately, Long Island sometimes becomes the redheaded stepchild. So not all programs are available in Long Island. So from a policy perspective, that's something we would love to see changed. Whether it's rebates, whether it's, access to financing, or, just public policy in general.
And that's great. That's awesome. I'm gonna just one last question real quick, Betta, that I was just gonna make sure we answer or throw in there. I love anonymous attendee says, I do not have a lot of faith in making strides at the federal level, which I am with you, anonymous attendee. I don't have much faith in the federal level. I'm a New York first kind of guy. Regarding infrastructure legislation, are there any efforts at the state level to increase and improve funding streams for the home energy retrofits? You could also throw in there, what do we mean by benefits? And this is for all of the panelists. When we say 35 to 40%, it's such amorphous language. If you want to clarify or nail it down within the context of instilling some faith in our state, like you were actually doing earlier, Michael, you had the gung-ho New York State moment. But if there's other ways you could sort of go into more detail here in relationship to that about the state.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as the benefits, there's a similar, Jamal mentioned the Climate Justice Working Group. So that group has not only been working to define what is a disadvantaged community, which there's an interim definition right now, but then there's a proposed final definition that's more or less ready here, and then it'll be public comment on that. There's also benefits. How are you defining benefits? And I think this is likely going to evolve over time, right? Benefits is, it's a challenge, right? To kind of get your hands wrapped around that, and then also, have the systems in place to actually track those benefits. So defining it and then being able to track it, and not just for one agency, but across, multiple state agencies. It's a big task, and I think so. We're starting with, there was a process of sort of filtering down, but the current set really includes a mix of, economic benefits like jobs, as well as environmental and health benefits, air quality, measuring air quality, things like that, improvements, as well as the energy benefits, energy burden reduction, things like that. So generally they fall into, and I'm sorry, I don't have like it all.
No, that's great. That was great. That's great.
I'll add really quick that, I think for me, by and large, participation in the clean energy transition is broadly speaking, one of the benefits that I think is really important. Currently, not everyone can participate, and just thinking about a lot of the comments that have been made in the Q&A and in the chat, simply because of the state of the building that they live in. So the ability to address the history of deferred maintenance and other health and safety issues directly impacts the ability of that household to benefit from NYSERDA's programs, utility programs, federal programs. And so, overcoming those barriers and opening up resources to address mold, lead, asbestos, et cetera, to me is one of the, is how I would define at least part of that benefits question. Are those issues being addressed, and can everyone now participate in these programs that are currently available?
Seeing that it's 1:29, and that was an excellent point from Jamal. I know we could probably talk for at least another hour or more about this, but I don't want to be a hog with people's time. It's been so great to have this conversation. And like I said in the beginning, I hope this is the beginning of all of us, working together, putting our heads together to figure out how we're going to address these barriers and come up with the solutions and invest in some of these terrific programs that already exist, that are finding the solutions, that need more resources. So please, if you haven't already, fill in that take action form that Mick shared. We'll send it in a follow-up email. Please be a part of this effort. We're building this movement, but as Jen said, we need all hands on deck. And so would love to have you participate in this and really push our elected officials to fight for funding, because that's, ultimately what we need. We need people to participate, and we need more money to do this. So we've got the technologies, honestly, and we're getting there at least, right? The domestic hot water piece, I think that was still gas with Guy's Energy Square, but that's because it's a large building. But that's coming too. So it's very exciting to be in this kind of turning point moment, and just want to see. I don't know if anybody had a burning thought or last point they wanted to make, or if we can wrap up now. But I know that everybody has things to do, and it's July 4th weekend. Maybe some of you are already taking off this afternoon and starting to enjoy the weekend starting now. So anything else that people want to add, or things I missed, Mick?
We'll follow up with the recording and slides. And thank you everyone for joining this incredible discussion. And we are excited to continue it maybe on green jobs and workforce development next time.
Thank you, everyone. It was nice to meet you all.
Thanks so much.
Thanks all.